way that I frame everything, okay? The way that I frame everything, you have poor and you have rich. And as discussed, they live in their own worlds, and they don't really connect with each other. They have different parenting strategies, they have different outlooks. The rich stay with themselves, the poor stay amongst themselves. So this looks like a very stable system, right? Stability. Or the word we can use is equilibrium. Now the question then is, why do societies collapse? Why are there revolutions? Why are there social changes? This looks like a system of equilibrium where, because of parenting, people know their place and people know how to best strategize about maintaining their place. So why is there social change? And the reason why is that this system has problems and it's stable, but the main problem is this system, okay? It's the rich that's problematic. And the reason why is that the rich are taught from day one to negotiate a better outcome. Okay, so another way of saying this is that the poor is like minimum outcome. Okay? The rich want the maximum outcome. The poor are like, you know what, if I'm alive, if I have a decent job, I'm okay. But the rich are like, no, I need to be the top dog. I need to improve my lot in society. Otherwise, what's the point of my life? Okay? So they have high expectations, okay? High expectations, low expectations. Okay? And this is a problem because power, it's a zero-sum game. Okay? Hierarchy is a zero-sum game. So only a few people can be at the top. So eventually you get into a situation where there are too many rich people and not enough powerful positions. And this is what's called elite overproduction. Okay? And then what happens here is that in order to get power, certain factions of the rich will align with certain factions of the poor against the powers that be. Okay? So all revolutions are always between the half a lot versus half some. It's never between rich and poor. It's always between half a lot and half some. So the people who led the Chinese Revolution, right? People like Mao Zedong, Zhou Enlai, Deng Xiaoping, they were not poor people. They didn't come from poor families. But they weren't rich enough, okay? So the Chinese Revolution was really between the urban elite versus the rural elite. Okay, the half a lot versus half some. If you look at every revolution in human history, that's always been the case. Okay? If you go back to Chinese history and you look at all these revolutions that started in China, it was always led by the middle class or the aspirational class, usually merchants, right? Merchants. Because they were discriminated heavily in society, but they had money. And they wanted to transform their money into power. And so when times were bad, when people were looking for change, they took the initiative and led people into revolution. Okay? Okay, does it make sense, guys? All right, any questions?
Yeah.
All right.
So you said the revolution was initially within those rich people. So how could they lead the poor people to follow them to start the revolution? Because revolution needs a huge amount of people, like the public base to initiate.
Okay. Okay, great question. Okay, so revolutions are almost the same. So over time, because of the structure, because of the inequality between rich and poor, certain problems arise, okay? So, and these problems are extremely common. The first problem, okay, problems. The first problem is indebtedness. Because the rich have a monopoly over wealth, for the poor to survive, they need to borrow money. But over time, because of interest rates, the poor find themselves in slavery. Okay? Because if you can't afford to pay back the bank or the rich person, then your body is collateral, okay? So you become a slave, but not only do you become a slave, but your children become slaves as well. So slavery becomes a very common problem. And then the third issue, of course, is landlessness. Okay? So these are the three most common problems that ultimately become the seeds of revolution. The poor get into debt, and so they lose their land, and their children become slaves. Their children's children become slaves as well. Okay? Because of interest rates, it's impossible for you to pay back that debt. Okay? So now you have a majority of people who have absolutely no incentive to live. So what happens now is that a elite, okay, say to these people, follow me into revolution and I will clear your debts. I will give you land and I will end slavery. And that's it. Okay? Every single revolution has been like this. There have been different names, okay? So for example, communists are like, we'll create a communist paradise. But what's a communist paradise? A communist paradise is where debt is canceled, where people are given land, and where no one's a slave, okay? Then others like, okay, we'll create a religious paradise. Islam, okay? So Muhammad, the Islamic Revolution was about this initially. Later on it changed, right? And Muhammad said to everyone, we're going to create a kingdom of heaven. But what's the kingdom of heaven? The kingdom of heaven is where people don't have debt, where people have land to feed themselves, and where there are no slaves. So if you're a Muslim, you can never be a slave. Okay? So look at every single revolution, it's this pattern. Whereas over time, because of inequality in society, you have people who fall into too much debt, they become slaves, they have no land, and then because of elite overproduction, you have this faction that splinters off, and who, in order to obtain power, get the people on their side, okay? And you look at the Roman Civil War, Julius Caesar was saying the same thing, right? Why was he so popular? Because he was saying to the Roman people, if I become king, I will get rid of your debt, I will free you of slavery, and I will give you land. And that's why they had to kill him, okay? Why is Donald Trump so popular in America right now? Same thing, man. Where Americans are in debt to their credit cards, student loans, their houses, and so they believe that Donald Trump were to come to power, if he were to become king, what's the first thing that king does? What the first thing that king always does is cancel all debts. Because if you cancel all debts, who loses power? It's the rich who lose power. And it's the rich who are almost dangerous to a king. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay? So again, this is a very similar pattern in human history. It's all game theory, okay? Any more questions, guys? Okay, ask one more question, then we'll break, okay? Is this clear to you guys? Okay. So another way of understanding this is that according to game theory, individuals don't really matter. Okay, you have to look at large groups, you have to look at large social trends. Okay, you cannot really change the outcome for certain groups of people like poor kids unless you look at the overall structure in which they live. One more question, guys. Then we'll break for the day. Yeah, Alan?
So, like, is that the society or like just the elite that really rule the country, who really have the power, have the motivations to maintain the society, that a certain degree of social mobility is allowed, but not all of them, but not really a big social mobility, so that firstly they can maintain their power, but second, like they give the lower class people a hope to get into the rich class, but not using like revolutions or other things that will like turn the society into collapse.
Okay, yeah. Okay, look, you're absolutely right. So social mobility is really the best form of governance, right? As long as you enable people with talent and ability and ambition to climb up, they'll be happy. And your society will be very stable. But not only will it be very stable, it will be very prosperous, very creative. And it doesn't matter what system you have, okay? So the example is, okay, America in the 1950s was a democracy. And there's a lot of social mobility. And so people worked really hard, and America became very wealthy. But guess what? In China, 1950s, China was not a democracy. It was a communist system. But in the 1950s, people worked really hard as well. Why? Because China was destroyed after decades of war, and there were lots of opportunities for social mobility. If you worked hard, you got promoted very quickly in the system. So even though it was a communist system, not a capitalist system, even though it was a command economy rather than democracy, people worked really hard because they thought that by working hard, they can improve their lives. So social mobility is the best form of governance. You don't need democracy, you don't need any system, okay? As long as you have social mobility, people will be happy. The problem, though, is that over time, less than a generation, all the positions of power are failed, okay? So the people with talent who made the country great, who made the country wealthy, when they get into power, they don't want people like them to replace them. They want their children to replace them. Okay? And over time, these children are a lot. So what happens is at the very top, all the positions are filled. And there's a waiting list as well. So if you are a poor person who works hard, really talented, unfortunately, all those positions at the top are filled already. And there's also a waiting list, so too bad. Okay? And again, you just look at Chinese history, right? Look at Chinese history, where at the beginning of the dynasty, you had all these talented people take the civil entrance examination, the Keju, and these are really top people. But then what happens is that they have children, and they teach their children how to do on the Keju, and then eventually they're like, you know what, we'll just cheat. So they corrupt the Keju, and then eventually like, you know what, screw this. Whoever can pay to pass the Keju will pass the Keju. And then all the positions at the very top are filled. There's no more social mobility. So what do people do? They engage in revolution, right? So you look at Hong Xiuquan, right? He failed the Keju, or there was no position at the top for him, so he believed he became the brother of Jesus, right? And he started this revolution that claimed tens of millions of lives in China. Why? Because there was no social mobility for him. 50 years ago, prior, he would have been a civil servant. Same thing for Mao Zedong, right? By the time that Mao Zedong became a university student, the Keju had been eliminated. So there's no way for him to climb the ladder anymore. Therefore, he had to start engaging in new ideas. Okay? So you're absolutely right in that social mobility is the best way to maintain social harmony, but people have children, and they want their children to succeed, and they will arrange a system in a way that only their children can succeed, which screws over every other children, everyone else, and so they have no choice but to overthrow the system, okay? Or another way of saying this is game reset. Game reset. This is what a revolution is, okay? So another way of saying this is that 100 people are playing a game, 10 people are winning, and they keep on winning, and they can only win. So everyone else is like, screw this game, let's start a new game. And the 10 people are like, nope, we're happy playing this game. They can't agree, so the 90 people the only thing they can do is a revolution, which allows for game reset, which now again allows for social mobility.